Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you very much for tuning back in. This is a custom-made screencast-matic presentation that's meant to help you with the final section of Unit 6, Lesson 4, Analyzing Bias. For this particular part of the lesson, we're going to be using media literacy skills that we learned in the past two lessons to look at sample news sources and identify the types of bias taking place. If you could please open up your doc to this part of the lesson, you'll see that there's different forms of bias that have been portrayed to you, from spin to opinionated statements to instantiated claims to sensationalism, mudslinging, mind reading, slant, and jumping to conclusions. These are just some of the forms of different bias that you might be able to detect and see for yourself when reading and or watching the news. So please go ahead and make sure you read through that section before continuing on through this presentation. And here's what we have to do for this part of the lesson. We actually have to read sample news sources right now, and of course fill out the chart accordingly based off of some questions, and then analyze the form of bias being conveyed. Now the good news for you is that I will show you my answer key, which will go over some keywords that show you the types of bias that'll make it the news source some type of way, but that of course is what I want you to do. So let's go ahead and follow along together in real time and start with the first section here for the bias in media analysis. It was another day in paradise, or according to some, a nightmare in international relations community. Members from 7 countries met today for a significant meeting in what could have been an important step towards better international solidarity. Sadly, instead of displaying camaraderie, the leaders gave a master class in personal insults, with leaders dodging questions and refusing to get along. As the debate raged, several leaders lashed out with each other, with one fuming into an unbelievable tirade and eventually leaving altogether. Now, of course, we must ask the obvious: what form of bias is being conveyed here from one of these that we just talked about above? Well, I can show you my answer key here and tell you that this is definitely biased by spin. The reason why I say that is if you look at some of the highlighting wording here, you can definitely see that that's clear as day. Words like nightmare, significant, could have been, sadly instead, raged, lashed out, fuming, refusing. So from that quick observation, we can type that actually into the chart right here. First, we must copy paste the green X and then put that here for spin. And then we'll go up here to the chart and we'll do this right now together. So of course we have words like nightmare. Let's go back to the reading here. We have raged, lashed out. And I believe another one that they have here is fuming. That's a good one too. What specific details does the article give about the person or event? Well, I think one of the biggest things here that they talk about is the fact that different people from different countries got together, and of course the meeting basically dissolved. It doesn't sound like it was good either in this way. What do you think has been left out of this article? Well, I do think that there's no mention whatsoever of any resolution of how the conflict was ended, and or was anything accomplished? I think that there probably was stuff that was accomplished, but I think the conflict and scandal probably overshadows that of the accomplishments here. What concerns do you have in the truthfulness and fairness of the article? Well, my main concern here is that I do wonder, is this a type of journalism that maybe looks at, you could say, the conflict aspect and scandal more than the substance? My personal feeling is that something must have been done in this meeting, and so, of course, to understand this a little bit more, that might help us to look at this from an objective standpoint. Okay, so that's how you do the first section there. Let's move on to the next part here. Breaking news: a train carrying workers from their home to the outer rim into the city has unbelievably derailed and gone off the tracks. First responders on the scene describe the survivors as being lucky to be alive. Fortunately, passengers will have their pound of flesh, as an investigation into what will surely end up to being a legal extravaganza is pending, with the transit authority already slamming the conductor up for negligence. Though there were no fatalities and injuries were minor, the fact that passengers can no longer feel safe while commuting to work will surely destroy the reputation of the already rocky transit authority. So let's go ahead and answer the obvious here first. What type of bias is this? I do believe that this is bias of sensationalism, and if you want to know the truth, I think it's pretty clear that upon closer examination of the article, the reason why this is sensationalist is because just look at some of the wording. Lucky to be alive, unbelievably, legal extravaganza, even pound of flesh. Some of the wording here obviously is pretty subjective in this way that leads us to think that. So let's go ahead and fill in the chart right here with some of those words. Pound of flesh. Yeah, let's do one more here. Okay, I think they mentioned slamming. Good word choice there. What specific details does the article give about the person or event? So it really talks about, a potential. Well, obviously, the first thing is that it talks about an accident that happened. But then, of course, then it alludes to a potential lack of trust in this particular form of transit and transportation. What do you think has been left out of this article? I think it's pretty clear to tell that there's no eyewitness account from anybody involved in the accident, and they all were alive, apparently, right? So there's no eyewitness account here to shed light on this, which I think is quite interesting. What concerns do you have about the truthfulness and fairness of this article? Well, I personally think it would be good for eyewitness accounts, or even those involved, to provide insight. Because you know what, if they did, maybe public trust in transit wouldn't be so bad, and maybe they might be okay, and maybe they would be just fine moving forward. So I think that's something to keep in mind here when it comes to analyzing the real reality of this situation. Let's move on to part 3 here. Next reading. Up-and-coming party representative took fire today at the courthouse as her proposal on No Meat Wednesdays, an effort to curb the unsubstantiated claims of global warming, was debated. Mrs. Anderson's No Meat Wednesdays, or NMW, has received some harsh criticism and backlash from members of the opposition party. The heated debate ranged from food shortages to taxes and even vanity, as one representative accused her of wanting him to go on a diet. A lot of the people present were brought to anger by her proposal, and it is unclear whether the NMW will be passed up the chain for serious legislation. So what type of bias is this? In looking at what we understand from this article and understanding a little bit more about what we see here, I think one could probably maybe assume that this is biased by slant, and here's why. Upon closer examination of the wording, you'll see words like this. Effort to curb the unsubstantiated claims. You see harsh criticism, backlash, okay. Accused her of wanting him to go on a diet, okay. So let's try to use some of these words here. What specific details does the article give about the person or event? Well, it basically talks about the proposal put forth by a lawmaker in order to solve some of the problems here that they see as necessary to fix. What do you think has been left out of this article? Well, I personally think that what's been left out are specifics pertaining to the proposal. I think that if there was more light shed here on this, and this is my last point, if there's more focus on the specifics, maybe more people could actually draw their own conclusions. So yes, we know about the drama of the event. We know that people in the courthouse were not happy with each other. Okay, got it. But what was actually in that proposal that made it so reviled by some? Okay? Alrighty, guys. Let's move on then. Of course, if you haven't done this already, we have to copy-paste this, by the way. But we will move on to the last reading here for us today. Alright, here we go. Video surfaced today on social media showing how someone can simply make their automobile run on water instead of gasoline. All you have to do is replace the gas in the car's tank with the water and then turn on the ignition. The car's engine, having been designed to support the intake of liquid, can work towards transforming the water into usable hydrochemical that, you guessed it, keeps the engine running. This works on all cars, and scientists are already talking about the chemistry behind it and the implications for the future. Some entrepreneurs have already begun experimenting with hydro-powered air travel. Interesting. So you might be wondering, what form of bias is this? Well, from our choosing here of selected options, our answer is actually a little bit interesting here to come to this conclusion, but I think it's true. This is unsubstantiated claims. So here's why. When someone is reporting something without proper support or evidence of facts, this leads us to believe that there's substantiated claims. I mean, just look at some of the wording here. This works on all cars. Scientists are already talking about. Okay, so in fact, let's use that phrase right there for the quotes. I think you guys might find this a lot when it comes to new products. You know what I mean? Some people might be eager to, of course, show, the legitimacy of a new product or an idea. What specific details does the article give about the person or event? Well, basically, they're talking about the proposals of modifying car technology, and of course energy. What do you think has been left out of this article? Well, of course, I personally think that real data and studies, real facts, have been omitted. And so one has to wonder, what are they hiding? Where's the data to give me, the consumer, an idea of the realities of this type of product? What concerns do you have in the truthfulness and fairness of the article? Well, it's just that. What are the realities of this new form of technology working? And I think, to be fair, that's what a lot of Americans struggle with sometimes when they hear new studies with facts and data regarding new tech devices and even other types of forms of energy. How will it work specifically? And from those conclusions, we can, of course, be better informed. So as you guys can see, those are some of the ways that we can think about bias and, of course, identify a little bit more truth behind the news that we consume on a daily basis. My hope is that this short presentation helps you out to understand a little bit more about the different forms of bias and how we can detect them to become better people with media literacy in mind. Thank you so much for tuning in, and please reach out if you need any help or clarity before submitting the lesson. Thank you again.